to the Journos on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Peter Martin, Hugh MacDonald, Steve McGowan and Alison McConnell are here with me on the show, and thank you to you for your fantastic support all throughout the season for this show. Lots of great feedback, not only from the YouTube channel, but of course lots of people who download it on the podcast to listen to it wherever they're walking with their dog or just walking about somewhere, reacting to what we have to say, some angrily and some saying, yes, he's really sensible or she's really sensible, and I'm glad they're on the show. I think I've covered all bases there.
Does it latter category?
Very narrow category.
I just thought to myself, you know, when I read some of the negative stuff and then the positive, I thought...
Keep it credible, Peter, for crying out loud.
Absolutely. I know, I tried to be so PC there. I don't know why I bothered, actually. Anyway, thank you to so many of you for your support. We have offered you the Journos and all our content absolutely free. We do have PLZ Premium, which we are giving you the opportunity to see additional content that we're making throughout the summer and next season. Hopefully that'll give you the chance to support us. You'll get lots of benefits in the PLZ Premium section as well. So lots to look forward to and lots of changes coming in the summer, which we hope you'll appreciate. Journos today, of course, Scottish Cup final on the way. Big changes managerially. We'll get your thoughts on that. I was looking at the top 10 favourite players I've watched in Scottish football this season. I've actually thrown in 6 additional Championship players that I've enjoyed watching as well. But you can give us your thoughts depending on the club you support, and over and above that, small matter of a playoff coming up and fan behaviour never too far away from our thoughts when you consider the injury to Jack McKenzie, the Aberdeen player. So that's what's all stacked up for us. Steven Gerrard, red hot favourite with the bookies for the return as Rangers manager. So Stephen McGowan, whether it's Steven Gerrard or somebody out of left field, what do you think, first and foremost, the reaction to the names that are being touted?
Well, I noticed this morning, since the suggestion of Wood Van Nistelrooy won't be along for this World at Leicester, so therefore Russell Martin looks as if he'll be in there. I thought Sean Dyche might be a shout for that. So it looks like Russell Martin's going to drop off the list as we speak, which I think pretty much only leaves Steven Gerrard as the other credible candidate. I did wonder whether Dyche might come into the running, but whether he fancies Scottish football, I don't know. It's only natural if you're Rangers and Rangers supporters and you're looking back at the last decade or even 12 years and it hasn't been a great deal to cheer, that you resonate, that you levitate towards the one event which gave you a really excellent day and season. And that was Steven Gerrard winning the title in the COVID season. So I think there's a slightly sepia-tinged aspect to it. I hope that they can recapture the glory of that season. I think there's nuance to that. I think Celtic fell off a cliff that season. I don't know what impact the COVID had on the whole thing generally. So I think there's an acceptance amongst fans that it's not absolutely a guarantee of success if he comes back. I suppose it depends. You look at it two ways. Celtic fans tend to say, he only won one title and won one trophy out of 9. And that's factually accurate. Rangers fans will think, but what a trophy it was, because it stopped Celtic winning 10 in a row. So there are fragmented views on it. I can see the logic in him coming back. Do I think it will offer any guarantee of success? I'm not sure it will.
Yeah, it's an interesting assessment of the situation you've made there, Alison. I look at the overall record of Steven Gerrard and as a manager, and by the way, I would counter this by saying that any manager can have redemption, over a period of time. Frank Lampard certainly was one that I think everybody was wondering why the hell is another club giving him a chance, but suddenly he transforms Coventry City. So Steven Gerrard certainly is a name that is fondly looked upon by Rangers fans, but his record as a manager is not great elsewhere.
No, I think the phrase that Stephen used there, sepia-tinged, is very pertinent in this situation. I just think I think that season and delivering that particular title, a title that obviously stopped Celtic winning a 10, it guaranteed a certain place in the affection of Rangers supporters. I think if you go back and look forensically at the record and at results, I don't think there's a lot there that Celtic as a club or the fans would look at and think, gosh, there's a huge challenge now coming from Ibrox. I think I was at the game. at Tynecastle when I thought Steven Gerrard was on the precipice of deciding he'd taken this team far enough and that he couldn't go anymore. And I think we saw how COVID changed things and it turned around. But I just wonder if Rangers might have been a bit more ambitious in their search for a manager and maybe coming out of the box and going and trying to find someone who maybe didn't already have an association with the club and go and try and find someone to come in and obviously deliver the kind of success that's been conspicuous by its absence for much of the last couple of decades. I think Steven Gerrard's a populist appointment. I think it'll appeal to a huge demographic of the Rangers support, but I just wonder whether or not he really has the credentials to go and take Rangers back to the top where they would like to be.
And the ultimate thing about this, Hugh, is quite simply that for me, the biggest appointment is not Steven Gerrard. The biggest appointment is potentially the new group of investors who will change the business ethos of Glasgow Rangers as a football club. I just wonder at this point, as a club coming in and as a business, whether they will have their own version of Jamestown analytics, which we are about to talk about a little later on in the show, if they'll have their own version, which involves having a chat with Kevin Thelwell to say, listen, this is what we want. This is what we want as a figurehead to take the club forward.
Well, I think the club has been run in many respects by the American consortium already, or certainly the tiller's been nudged. I don't think it's reasonable to presume that the present Rangers board and the present Rangers hierarchy are going to make a decision on the manager without at least very robust consultation with the guys that are coming in. I find the Gerrard one strange in the same way I found the McInnes one strange, that is that if you are coming at it from, the whole rhetoric behind the new guys coming in was a 49ers thing. It's not really a 49ers thing, we know that. But this is a 49ers infected thing that it'll all be about analytics, it'll be about data, it'll be about the sporting director being at the top, it'll be a head coach slotted in, etc., etc. Well, the whole Gerrard thing just runs contrary to that strategy. Because what you would think was that certainly in American brands and franchises, the sporting director's the top man and the coach is a coach.
Yeah.
I don't see how you can sell that to Steven Gerrard. I really don't.
It's interesting as well, that just what you said there. A few days ago we were talking about David Ancelotti and the big gamble that it would be, bringing in this name, but this unproven name, this young coach with something to prove, who's making his way in the game. So if that's in your thinking and that's the kind of profile you're looking for, how do you go from that to Steven Gerrard? Do you get the point I'm making?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
If you've decided that is what you are after, and that, listen, no one has ever confirmed that, because to be fair to Rangers, they've kept this tight as you like, tight as a drum. So very little has got out. I'm just bemused that we went from 4 or 5 days ago, David Ancelotti will be manager of Rangers, and now suddenly it's like, well, Steven Gerrard.
Well, you say there's been nothing let out. I don't agree with that. I think significant things have just been let out just to keep the whole thing boiling along. Because that's what clubs do. They strategically, plant little seeds here and there just to keep things going.
I don't think they do as often as people think they do, Peter. I think that's one of the myths out there, actually, is that our clubs brief. Rangers and Celtic brief. Rangers and Celtic don't brief. They should, but they don't.
Yeah. Well, listen, the great thing about it is I'll disagree with you on that. On the basis that...
No, you're not allowed to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is a great thing. Welcome to my world.
This is your show, sorry.
No, just my world. You can fire into the show, because as Hugh does on a regular basis in Ali, you can give me a right kicking. I've had 3 against 1 on this show on many an occasion. But the point I'm making is, no, they do brief. They do certain times, because there are certain journalists who have... at one point or another, a good relationship with a chairman, with a chief executive. You do get snippets, and you do get people that I call, I want to try and use a word here which does not in any way kind of take me down a road of madness, but
cheerleaders,
lapdogs. Yeah, absolutely.
But I get that all the time. I get it all the time. Oh, Peter Lawwell and Celtic tell him this, that, next thing. rubbish.
I also had that accusation at times as
Complete
well,
and
it's
utter
nonsense.
rubbish.
No, listen.
Celtic do not leak or brief anything to me or anybody else, as far as I can see.
No. The point I'm making to you is that may be your personal experience of it. I'm giving you it from another angle, where as you move forward in life, you do get snippets. I got them, from various sources. That's how you.
That's journalism, yeah.
That's the name of the game.
That's different though. You going and asking someone a question and someone tells you something off the record isn't someone briefing you. That's not someone contacting you to say, can you put this out?
That's a different topic. The point here is there are occasions when somebody will give you something and they say, listen, by the way, this is happening. And you as a journalist automatically have to in your brain kick in and go, right, is this a cynical ploy to try and get me to put out a complete load of nonsense? You do get that because, at one point, or I'm not individually want to make this about the way I was brought up in the broadcasting sense of journalism, but it was just basically you ain't get a story, you're not getting on. And every day of my life for at least 20 years, it was constantly speaking to people. It was always trying to break stories. That was the name of the game. So you didn't survive without it. You didn't get on shows, you didn't get on television, you didn't get on radio, and you were trying like hell, and your whole life became stressed with it. And sometimes you got stuff that you have to analyse and say, right, that's a lot of bollocks, but there are some things that you think, I know why they're doing that. Now, the point here is, going back to Rangers, the only thing they've got going against them in this whole process is that the timeline hasn't worked out ideally for them. Ideally, it would have been the group of investors with this 49ers blueprint have bought the club and it's March. And then all of a sudden, they're calling the shots. That timeline of due diligence, that timeline of buying the shares and all of that hasn't fallen in the way
you can't control that. It's spinning plates all the time.
Exactly. So you can't control that element of it. The secondary part to it is quite simply you have a board at the moment who's trying to make sure that they have the right message going out there to influence people to buy strips, to buy season tickets, to continue in case something didn't go right, which by all accounts from people that I've spoken to said, look, it's nearly there. So you have to take them at their word, because unless someone within an inner sanctum turns around and says to you, here's the problem with the board and here's the problem with the actual takeover, nobody in our profession really knows the inside track on the dotting the I's and crossing the T's. But the process and the timeline has not worked in their favour. So they're now in a situation where Patrick Stewart and the rest and the previous chairman have said, listen, we've got to embrace a blueprint like Celtic. We've also got to embrace, moving forward and getting investment into the club. And they've been open with that. But they've also got to take the fans along with them. And as Stephen mentioned there as well, the timeline hasn't been in their favour. But they still have to come up with someone that excites them along the way. And I don't get Steven Gerrard on this. I agree with you on this. I just don't get that appointment. Whether it's supplemented by this time around he'll have a substantial amount of cash, certainly not in the same aspect as Graham Souness had in those years when nobody was able to keep pace with them. They will have certain financial fair play rules that will halt that type of spend. But I don't think the timeline's worked out in their favour.
Yeah, I think. I think it was always going to take a while to get the takeover through and confirmed and funds in place. I also think the structure of the club, I'm interested to see what happens with Steven Gerrard, because I had assumed the appointment of a sporting director would be the be-all and end-all, that the sporting director then has to be in place first before the manager is appointed, because of the creation of a new kind of culture around the club, and in terms of that guy being the most important central figure within the club. I think the Steven Gerrard appointment flies in the face of that.
Yeah, if it happens.
If it happens.
Yeah. And then on the flip side of that, there's as you say, they're spinning plates, Stephen, and now the clear-out starts. You know, Balogun, Hadji, Lawrence, Czerny, Fernandez and Casemiro all go back to their parent clubs. So they're emptying the decks. And to be fair, I think Rangers have strategically emptied the decks at boardroom level as well. You know, they've absolutely started to offload and get everything as lean and mean as it possibly can be.
Alison kind of stole my point I was going to make, actually, which is I do agree that Kevin Felwell actually is probably more important than the head coach, because, sporting director strategy, in terms of the identity, the ethos of the club, give them continuity, but more important than that, recruitment. It's going to be absolutely key to this. And it's the biggest complaint Rangers fans have had over the years, that they haven't bought players well enough, haven't bought enough good players. So the clear out really is the start of that, is restocking the shelves and bringing in players who can work in Scottish football. What we saw this season too often, is players who were good at playing a counter-attack and high-pressing game in Europe and against Celtic were no good at breaking down the low block, as we call it. So they need to be mindful of that. Who can they get that can do that? Funny enough, I thought Russell Martin would have been good from that perspective. You know, his defending is always kind of criticised, obviously, but, you know, in terms of his all-out attacking football, it might have worked at Rangers from the point of view of beating the kind of also-rans, if you like. But, you know, we can't have it both ways, because a week or so ago, people were saying Ancelotti's too big a risk, too big a gamble. They need to go for the tried and tested. Well, they're going for the tried and tested. If they're going for Steven Gerrard, he's as tried and tested as they come in terms of a Rangers manager. The question is, can he work with Kevin Felwell to restock these shelves and get really good players in who will make Rangers better on the pitch?
And with that in mind, when you're looking at the criteria for the ideal manager, suddenly Derek McInnes comes in, and I noticed Ryan Stevenson getting all uptight in one of the tabloids today, talking about, you know, is he the manager or the coach? This is a lot of nonsense. Poppycock, you know, he should be called the manager. He's going to be the manager. I don't really care about all the titles that go with it. Derek McInnes has been brought in. Has he been brought in, as we've been debating prior to this show, with Jamestown Analytics in mind? I think Jamestown Analytics is basically the strength of that process, that blueprint, that algorithm, if you will, is all about players. There has to be more of a boardroom feel about, let's look and see overall what a manager offers, what a coach offers, and if he has the credentials. I don't think you start looking at Jamestown Analytics and saying, well, this guy's won 42% of his matches, and you know, they don't take into circumstances all the things that could have been going on in the background, like a mad boardroom. You know, I gave you Dundee, which we'll talk about shortly, but.
Well, I think the Hearts are all over the place with this one. You know, I've said it last week. I mean,
they were miffed with you last week. The amount of Hearts fans absolutely battered you.
That's fine. That's what we're here for.
Rightly so.
And I'll tell you why it is. You know, what you've got is that you've got a team and is scheduled to be third in the league and qualify for European football, being in the bottom six. Team that's had 3 managers this season. A team that depends on the kindness of others to break even. And then, most crucially, a strategy which has no semblance. It's like Stephen talking about, let's go for Steven Gerrard or Ancelotti. How do you get from Critchley to Derek McInnes? That's a sea change. Now, McInnes might come in and be the greatest manager in Scotland. He's certainly got a very good CV in Scotland. But he's not. Doesn't he fill the criterion set out by Critchley? So what do? You go on a strategy then, because it doesn't work out. You say, and you go, let's change this ship around now. And that's what's happened. The whole strategy in the club has completely did a 180-degree turn.
Can't they not admit to making a mistake, Hugh?
Yeah, but the mistake, fine, they can make a mistake, that's not a problem. But the mistake is not on who they chose. The mistake is how they chose them. If they say, this is the KPIs that we want from a manager, and identify Critchley and say, well, we made a mistake with that. We'll use the same KPIs and we'll get somebody in anyway, because this is all going to be run by analytics. They've not done that.
I don't remember, listen, I'm here to be corrected on this, but I don't remember Andrew McKinley coming out and saying we are going to be selecting a manager fully on Jamestown analytics. I can't remember
Maybe
that
not
line.
maybe not publicly, but I think it was made clear at the time, and I know from checking and running the story that Jamestown analytics were going to be integral to picking Neil Critchley, and they were. They were. I think you can tweak it slightly. You could probably still have the same KPIs as you put it, and you can say we need somebody with experience of Scottish football. And if you put that and the computer says, yes, it's Derek McInnes. If that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for experience of Scottish football, I think part of this as well, Hugh, is that they're a fan-owned club. And as we know, fan-owned clubs, as we're seeing at clubs like Morton and Motherwell and so on, can be unpredictable because the fans want their say and they're emotional and they maybe think with that more than that sometimes. So at Hearts, if you have a bad run as a manager, you're on a really sticky wicket very early, as Critchley found out. So you're looking not just the manager, but in terms of the chief executive and sport director, you're probably looking for a safe option sometimes. And you're right, Hugh. I mean, clubs do this all the time. You know, sack a manager and they flip to a completely different opposite end of the spectrum in terms of next choice. But I think they're just looking for what they think is the safest pair of hands. And I think in terms of Scottish football experience, profile and so on, I think it's not a bad fit. I think there's a valid question to be asked about whether Derek McInnes will be comfortable with other people picking the players that he signs. But what I imagine will happen is that he will say, I am looking for this striker with these attributes. They will go in, put the data in, they will find a list of candidates. They'll come back. Hopefully it will work collaboratively and it will work out well. Time will tell.
That point that you've just made there, Stephen, is exactly the way I think the process goes. Stephen Robinson on this programme came on and said, listen, I do look at analytics.
Yeah.
But I don't live by it. I phoned my one sole guy, Martin, who I have 100% trust in, and he said, I've had a look at this guy. It's not happening. Or if I have a look at this guy and it is happening, why don't you come and have a look at him now? And then we'll see. But his trust, if he can't get to someone, is in his one man, his main man. Now, I stand to be battered from pillar to post in defence of Hearts here, with the foundation of Hearts, with Andrew McKinley and Budge, anyone else you care to mention in that boardroom. I don't know anybody who sat there and went, Neil Critchley, he's the man, here's the stats, he's Jamestown Analytics, he's an ideal thing. I didn't see anything from Neil Critchley out of left field that suddenly he was a man red hot for other clubs to even be looking at when he was unveiled. People were like, who? Is that guy that just had one game in charge of Liverpool when the rest of the team had gone to, across the other continent?
I do think Jamestown Analytics had a say in his appointment. I think they were definitely used, but I would agree. I always had the feeling that he just wasn't quite getting the club. Like he just wasn't quite understanding the demands at Hearts. I was at Fir Park when they failed to get top six, and he was saying, on another day, this is actually a decent result and a decent performance. And you're thinking, you can't be sitting saying that on a day when you failed to make the top six. Hearts have failed to make the top six. I think sometimes you can make an appointment on paper or on computer without understanding some of the cultural aspects that go with certain clubs. There are certain demands that go with teams and with clubs and expectations that I think have to be sourced through conversation.
I think you've identified one of the big problems. Brendan Rodgers always says it, doesn't he? He says that data informs my decision making, it doesn't make a decision. Yeah. Because if you
need your due diligence for other aspects.
Yeah, Paul McStay had a great post on LinkedIn last year there. He said that his dad was a great flat cap scout in the touchline. Now, we all accept it. You must embrace all the technology. You must use any advantage you can get these days. But the problem with the data is it will tell you how many passes a player makes, tells you how many yards he runs, doesn't tell you how he reacts to adversity. It doesn't tell you how he will cope when there's 50,000 fans baying at him from the stands. And it's finding that.
You need someone to work, like, who are you as a person? What lies beneath the stats and what lies beneath the dryness of the stats? But in terms of what makes you the kind of player or personality that you are, I think that only comes through conversation and through a bit of other homework, through speaking to people.
I'd love to sit down with Andrew McKinley and say, okay, Did Jamestown Analytics suggest Neil Critchley? He's going to embrace the Jamestown Analytics. Yeah. Final game against Motherwell. Need to get into the top 6. You need to win the game. Did Jamestown Analytics go, okay, we'll stick James Wilson on and we'll put you the top scorer who's likely to get you a goal over the 70, 80, 90 minutes. Yep, I've had a look. Yep, his scoring rate is unbelievable. 30 goals last season. I think I'll stick him on the bench and bring him on with 15 minutes to go. Give me a bloody break. I mean, come on. I mean, it's just absolute lunacy. He just moved into what I call, I usually have his name to hand, the Hibs manager.
Lee Johnson.
Lee Johnson. He just moved in. He started talking in riddles.
5
just
transfer
started,
windows.
yeah. I need 5 transfer windows. Just started talking nonsense. And then you actually got to the point you thought, come on, man, you can't get to the final game. And so I don't buy into this. I think your point there that Brendan Rodgers made is absolutely on the mark. It helps me, but it doesn't make my decision.
That's the crucial. That's what I'm trying to say. That's the crucial fault line. The crucial fault line is not analytics and or personal scouting. It's what the club decides is going to be their primacy. It's what the club decides is going to be their protocol. Now, the protocol at Celtic is that Brendan Rodgers is given various choices and he decides, right? He says, this is it, 1 to 4, I'll take it. Or even 1 to 4, no, I'm going for 5, he's just been released from Crystal Palace, right? That is the protocol and that's how it works. At Liverpool, for example, it's completely different. Slot and Klopp are told it's 1 to 4. You choose 1 to 4 and then we'll have a discussion about it. They can be vetoed. They can say, well, I actually want number 2. And Richard Hughes and what will say to, well, no, this is why we're going for number 1. So you've got really big managers who are comfortable being overruled, or not comfortable, will accept being overruled. That's another protocol. I don't think it takes much insight into Scottish football to where Derek McInnes lies on that scale.
I had a chat the other week there with Neil Warnock. He was up in Dundee and we're discussing his views on data. And, obviously Neil has this image as one of the great dinosaurs because of his age and what have you, and his old school. I don't even think he would necessarily deny that he was old school. And he was just talking about when he was at Crystal Palace and he was told about a central defender up in Scotland and he quite fancied him, and his assistant Ronnie Jepson went up to have a look at him and he thought, yeah, this boy will do for us. Playing with a fag in his mouth. And went back down, he said to his data men, 3 of them were aware at Crystal Palace, he said, I want you to have a look at this fellow, and he said, come back, he says, Neil, we don't want you to sign him, he's too slow. And of course, Virgil van Dijk turned out okay.
Yeah.
Virgil van Dijk turned out okay. So I suppose that just gets back to the point, which is that data is useful, it's not perfect.
Yeah, don't let your eyes deceive you. And with that in mind, all the data, albeit the data suggests that they're only 1 point worse off, but they played lesser clubs in the bottom 6. But suddenly, if you get a team like Dundee in top 6, and then the next season, you get to a situation where you have injuries, which everybody does, but your great rivals, Dundee United, suddenly are above you, going for Europe, and you're struggling to stay in the league, you get the sack. Tony Docherty. I'm gobsmacked.
I was surprised. Not much surprises me in Scottish football. I think Ian Murray, perhaps, at Raith Rovers, didn't quite see that coming, though I knew there was, there's a new broom or brooms at Raith Rovers. But I was surprised that Tony Docherty going. The reasons for going is you've probably outlined. They were parachuting down towards the relegation and the playoff spots. That certainly concentrates the mind of a board. They don't come out with a sense of relief and jump about saying, oh, we've escaped it. They probably look at, right, we don't want to go. We don't want to be in that position again. There were certain flaws in the team. The team couldn't defend. When we're going to discuss the exciting players we've watched in Scottish football this season, and I would think there would be 3 or 4 we could mention at Dundee, but their problem was keeping Waynes out the close, as they say, and they couldn't do it. And I think the board, who have got various strategies in place, one of which is a move to a new stadium, will want to go down a different route.
Are you surprised?
Probably shouldn't be. I'll say that because Dundee are acquiring a track record of wielding the axe freely. It's 9 managers in 11 years now, I think it is. Since 2019, they are moving on to manager number 7. They're not alone in that, by the way. Hearts, Hibs and Kilmarnock are moving on, are either on or moving on to number 7 as well. We're in a climate now where managers are just sacked of impunity. They're sacked really freely. John Nelms and Gordon Strachan are obviously at the helm, and if you think back to Gary Boyer, for example, who I think he won a managerial award and was sacked the next week. So I think you tend to, if you're lucky, you have a 2-year shelf life at Dundee. And I think anybody who's looking at that job, be it Sean Maloney or Scott Brown or whoever, would be looking at that and wondering whether it is the best job for your long-term prospects. Because, as I say, you're becoming a club who hire and fire managers at will.
Yeah, I mean, it's just shows you how the managerial merry-go-round, it's crazy. Sean Maloney could be in the running for this, may well be the influence of Gordon Strachan on who they're picking as the manager, but over and above that, Sean Maloney got in at Hibs, and he said he told me, he said, I thought I was going to get sacked after 4 weeks, because what they told me I was getting and what actually started to transpire was so far away from it. He says, I genuinely thought they were going to bump me 4 weeks into the job. And suddenly that Sean Maloney experience prompted the Hibs board to change their tact.
Completely changed tact. If you look at how long they stuck with David Gray this season, when it was really looked as though it was in the mire going into December, and they were still at the bottom end of the table, and it's worked. Having a bit of patience and sticking with it has worked. I have to say, I was surprised at the Tony Docherty announcement this week. I think what's the remit at Dundee? What's the expectation level? He came up, he kept him. It's a fantastic first season after winning promotion. He's kept him up. You'd have to say, what's the standard and expectation at Dens Park for next season? What is it that do they see themselves as a top 6 club? Is that what the challenge is for any manager coming in? But I thought he had enough credit in the bank from last season, and then I think if you keep them in the top flight for another go at it, I thought he was worthy of that. But in terms of clubs hiring and firing, I think sometimes you can do it far too quickly. Yeah. I think sometimes it becomes knee-jerk. And then if you have a reputation as a club of not giving managers space and time to work with it, you have that example of Sean Maloney getting in and thinking, I'm feeling the pressure immediately because it's not working.
I think it's because, it's certainly from my point of view as an old granda, and a football granda, is that the whole culture of football has changed when at once the manager was the man. And that even ties in the analytics, the previous government, but the manager was the man, he decided everything, etc., and he expected to be given time, and he expected to, they'll get. Nowadays, managers are just coaches generally. Yeah,
subcontractors.
Subcontractors, and they know. And the other thing as well is that not only they know that, like, there's various cultural things that come into it, like a Sean Maloney. I mean, when Sean Maloney's going into Hibs and getting sacked, he'll accept it much more than, say, an Eddie Turnbull would have, years ago, for 2 reasons. One, that's the culture now, you get in and get out. And second reason is he's not working for a living. It's a very important, because you should now say to people, who would take that job, and they'll say, yeah, I'll take that job, just to have a go at it, even if we're going to get a year, a season, it'll be bumping, and see if it doesn't work out. It doesn't really torpedo my CV anyway, because everybody knows. I mean, top class managers are coming in and out for a year, and you're going to see what Ange after 2 years, the story with him as a man that's won titles, literally all the world. The story doesn't matter what he does in the Europa League final. He's out. He's done. Yeah. And you don't speak for Ange, but in the old days when Bill Shankly was told to go away from Liverpool, a guy who actually physically built the club, he went back to his semi-detached house and his Ford Zephyr or something like that. Ange Postecoglou is generationally wealthy because of what's the contract Spurs gave him. It's just a completely different thing now.
Yeah, let's not knock Ford Zephyrs. Worth a few bob now if you get one.
Still got one. Still got one.
No. Listen, this man's the only man I know that can buy a car and age it within 3 weeks of taking it out of the showroom.
The last time I looked at this guy, didn't have a passenger door.
Yeah,
really,
absolutely. Hugh has, I'm almost certain, get 4 or 5 managers in the back of the boot of his car. But nevertheless,
But dark.
That was quite a leap.
Listen, calm down. We've been used to that this week. Of all weeks. Okay, we're going to talk Scottish Cup final. We're going to talk Livingston and Ross County in the playoff, and then we're going to talk our top 10 favourite players, Ali, that I've watched this season. We might as well. We're getting to the end of the season. Not necessarily the best players. So I've thrown up a few that I've seen because, like Hugh, and I include both of you in this as well, we are, I would say, journos who go and watch other teams other than Celtic and Rangers, some out of necessity because we can't get in. But I have always been known for going and watching other teams as well. Anyway, Stephen, just as you gave me that look.
It's not a matter of time before you're banned by them as well. So
yeah, absolutely. I know it's certainly going that way. But we'll talk about that. And we mentioned Gordon Strachan there, and of course, there's lots of things going on at PLZ Soccer. Of course, PLZ Premium. We've got lots of new programmes coming on in the summer. Lots of things changing. Events that we will be doing with various footballers, managers. We've got one coming up, which I think, I can't remember. I mean, they might have been together in one room. They certainly said to me that they hadn't been actually in each other's company when I invited them to the PFA Awards, Martin O'Neill and Gordon Strachan, which I found rather startling. So I've decided to get the two of them together for an evening talking about Clough, Ferguson, Aberdeen, Manchester United, and of course the two of them manage Celtic. And of course, when you think of their successes, European success, certainly for Gordon Strachan and Martin O'Neill, it's unbelievable. And roll that all into the fact that the two of them are incredibly funny and entertaining. I think it could be a good night. Hopefully you can come along.
Hi there, I'm Kerry Pollock. Come and join us for an evening with Martin O'Neill and Gordon Strachan. Together for the first time as a double act, Martin O'Neill and Gordon Strachan talk football management, look back at their trophy-laden playing careers, the management they worked under, and share the laughs that they had in the dressing room at the peak of their powers. It's tales of Clough and Ferguson chasing domestic and European glory. Both former Celtic managers will tell their tales of title triumphs and European nights not to forget. It's a night not to miss on Saturday the 14th of June at the Alona Hotel in Strathclyde Park. Click on the link below to secure your table now.
Yeah, should be a good night. Really looking forward to it. You can click on the link for that and come along. If you want, you'll see Martin and Gordon in full flow. With that in mind, of course, Gordon was able to manage Celtic and he played for Aberdeen with distinction, and the two of them come together in the Scottish Cup final. And I'll hide that because, Ali, I know you scanned this.
I have no specs on. I can't.
Even better. I'll go straight to it then. I wonder if you can remember the 1990 Cup final. It actually went to a sudden death.
No, it's
Penalty shootout, because obviously it's the last time Aberdeen won in a cup final against Celtic. Any idea who missed? There was 2 Celtic penalties missed. Any idea, Stephen, of who missed them?
Yeah, because I spoke to Brian Irvine for the paper last week. Docherty missed the first, did he?
Yep.
And Anton Vogan ended up one saved by Theo Snelders with a 19th penalty, I believe.
Yeah. And the other one that brought it to the 19th penalty was an Aberdeen player who missed it.
Oh, no, that was Brian. No, it wasn't Brian Grant.
Yes, it was.
Was Brian Grant?
Yeah.
It was Brian Grant.
So there you are. Not a good.
But it was a good. It was. I was talking to Brian Irvine last week. Awfully big fellas up in Inverness now. You talk about generational wealth. You know, Brian is working in Marks and Sparks in Inverness now. You know, and it just shows it's a different world for the players of today from 30, 40 years ago. But he had a story that tickled me when he was at school, Victoria School in the Airdrie area. And they played against Chapel Hall, the 1979 Schools Cup final. And it was a 3-3 draw. After extra time, it went to penalties. And he was one of 4 Victoria players who missed a spot kick. It was his 14th birthday, and sitting on the turf that day, he said, I'm never taking another penalty as long as I live. Never taking one as long as I live. That's it, I'm done with penalties. And of course, we get forward to May 1990, and 19 penalties have been taken. And the only players who are left for Aberdeen who can take one are Brian Irvine and Theo Snelders. So he's like, I'm going to have to take this. So he's walking forward from the centre circle, thinking back to 1979 at Chapel Hall against Victoria. And he puts it past Big Pat Bonner, and he's the last man who scored a winning penalty or a winning goal of any description for Aberdeen's Scottish Cup final. And you've got guys like me still calling him about it 35 years later. I mean, you talk about sliding doors moments, and that's one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're a very good side then. Hans Heelhuis, Jim Bett was in there, Charlie Nicholas playing for Aberdeen, Robert Connor. So they're a really good side. I'm glad you actually mentioned that. We're willing to give you the benefit of it because you were chatting to him as well. Young Graham Watson was in the side. I mean, Graham Watson. I mean, I don't think he would have played with any great regularity after that. But he got a Scottish
penalty.
Cup. Yeah, got a Scottish Cup winners' medal, scored a penalty. So suddenly, we look at that side. We look at the fact that in 1990, and you'll be well aware of this, you and Alison and Stephen. This Aberdeen side that got to the Scottish Cup final, when you talk about Rangers 9 in a row, 6 out of the 9 that Rangers won, Celtic weren't the second force. You had Aberdeen, you had a Motherwell in there, obviously chasing Rangers down. But Aberdeen, more often than not, were the team that were chasing them down.
And Aberdeen merely had to go to Ibrox and avoid defeat and win a title under Alex Smith. But they get terrorised by Mark Hateley that day.
Hans Heelhuis miss early in the game, as I recall.
Yeah, a big miss early in the game. Aberdeen were always... I mean, that was probably coming towards the end of the decade that Aberdeen, you always associate Aberdeen with the 80s, I think, and to a certain extent Dundee United as well. But it was just coming to the age of when Scottish football finances were going to change because... Snelders in goal was outstanding and Hillhouse up front. My goodness.
It wasn't in goal the day Rangers beat them 2-0.
No, it was Michael Watt. Michael Watt. Mark Hateley stood in the tunnel. He like years later spoke to Mark Hateley about it, some anniversary of it. And Mark Hateley stood in the tunnel and looked at him and he said, "I thought he was a mascot." And he said the first thing he turned round to whoever it was, I can't remember who precisely it was, and said, hit a long sort of lob, a hanging lob into the area. I'm going to take this kid out, the first challenge. And of course he clattered him first time. These are the days where you got more than got away with that, kind of was expected, and he clattered him first time, and he said, as soon as I clattered him, he said two things. He said, I felt the Aberdeen players should all have had a go at me. They should have been pulling Aberdeen players off me, and the referee should have booked me. He said, neither happened, and I went, oh, this is going to be our day, all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I would concede that even if Hulk Hogan had been in goal, Mark Hateley would still have had a go at him. He was one of those really
very much
centre forwards.
But also a very technically good centre forward. I mean, this is a guy this is a guy that's career, encompasses Milan, so.
And we're talking about Celtic and Aberdeen, where it wasn't as big a chasm as it is now.
Oh.
And I don't know if, and I know, by the way, I have to say, Nicky Devlin sent me a text. I said that I would, on the show, that I would wear the full Aberdeen kit if Aberdeen beat Celtic in the Scottish Cup final. But I have to be honest, I know you're laughing about it, Ali, but Nicky Devlin sent me a text saying, what size are you? The boys all want to know what size. And I thought, oh, there you go, it's got there. But nevertheless...
I think you're going to be on a notice board on Saturday morning, aren't you?
But the point, for me, as I look at it, I'm looking at the stats. 4 wins, 1 draw, they've scored 19 and they've conceded 4 Celtic against Aberdeen. They've absolutely battered them. And this is, if this was a boxing match, you would have thought to yourself, wait a minute, I don't know who put this together. Even in an algorithm or an analytics, you don't put Celtic and Aberdeen together in the ring with this one because it just looks so one-sided to you.
Yeah, well, that again, that's what figures of the. I mean, Celtic B went up there the other week and 1-5-1. Probably, I can't remember the precise team, but maybe just one of the starters, perhaps starting in Saturday. Callum McGregor. I don't think any of the other players that played in the 5-1 game will start even in Saturday. So that's what the analytics say. That's what the form says. I think Aberdeen are knitted for Celtic in the way that they play because they want to You know, they want to play aggressively, they want to press high, they want to, you know, they want to use space. And the more space you give Celtic, particularly at Hampden, the more problems you have. You saw that in the League Cup semi-final when Celtic just broke in Aberdeen ferociously. But, and there's always a but, stranger things have happened. I'm always, and I think football in a 90-minute game, a cup final, things can happen.
Well, you know, you're talking about the starting 11 that night. James Forrest was in it. And if James Forrest isn't in the starting 11 on Saturday, I'd be gobsmacked. I mean, I know Nicholas Kuhn started the season well, but in terms of the impact Forrest has had in Celtic coming off the bench or starting in recent games, I mean, that night at Pittodrie, he terrorised, 33-year-old Forrest terrorised poor Graham Shinney at left back.
But he did that last season towards the tail end.
Absolutely, and he got a place in the Euros, and history is kind of repeating itself. So for me, I would have Forrest in for Kuhn on Saturday, and the other thing, I would start Yang as well, and I would have Maida through the middle.
Yeah.
I just think I'm not going to join the pile on an Adamida or what have you. You know, he is what he is. His goal tally is decent. I just think that Celtic collectively are better when Maida plays through the middle, and I would play him there. And I think Yang has shown enough in recent games actually to get the nod for this one.
And the strange thing about it is, and I mentioned Nicky Devlin there, you know, he was getting rave reviews early on in the season, and then obviously Jimmy Thelin decides to pick his own man. It certainly hasn't been backed up with the back line and their form of late.
No, but you know, Thelin will probably say, yeah, they need time to bed in, etc., etc. But you know, Hampden in the Scottish Cup finals with Dyson Maida going about like an angry bee is not the place to bed in. Yeah. I think if you were looking for, you know, the contrary view, if you're looking for a view to say, you know, how do Aberdeen win? Aberdeen win in the break with pace. It'd be interesting to see if Thelin plays, you'll play Keskinen, but if he plays Shaden Morris as well, because you could see a Celtic high back line, you know, being compromised by pace. But I really don't see much else. Although Aberdeen,
they lost 5-1 at Celtic Park in a midweek game, and they had 2 or 3 brilliant chances at the way they started. They started the game really well. Had they taken 1 or 2 of them, they could have made a real game of it. That's the best chance the weekend. I slightly worry for Jimmy Thelin if they do go down to another heavy defeat here.
I have to be highly critical of him on the basis of this, Alison, and I might be wrong here, but I think a homebred manager would have been under more pressure. When he went through that unbelievably dreadful run, people are saying, oh yeah, but he came out of it. He might have come out of it in people's eyes, but he came out of it with the wins were against Dundee, they were against Kilmarnock, they were against Motherwell, Ross County, and the one that you would say was a good, credible one was a really in-form Hibs side, and they had them at Pittodrie. The rest of it is all draws and defeats. You know, they're beating Elgin in the Cup, they're beating lesser sides from lower divisions. There's not been a great switch in form. They're on the back of 4 consecutive defeats. Their form going into it's abysmal, and I don't see for that full season. And by the way, can I just say something to you? He'll be the manager next year. I mean, I can tell you because I've spoken to people at Aberdeen.
Dave Cormack loves him, yeah.
They are going to. He is going to be given another summer of transfer win. I'm not advocating he should be sacked. I'm just saying the form's not great. The team hasn't, since that real fall off, hasn't come back with any great gusto to suggest he's starting to get it right again. He's going to get another transfer window for obviously Aberdeen are going to back him. Yeah,
I think what's helped him is just the start that he had. The fact that he had so much credit to begin with, the fact he got off to such a good run. And we spoke about it at the time, that they were beating teams that they should be beating, that they were winning games that you would expect them to win, and that they were going to come a point. There was going to come a point where you know, it got a bit more challenging, and they actually had come through the challenging period until they got to Hampden. It was when they played Celtic in the League Cup final. I think the ramifications of that result just seemed to linger like a hangover. It just seemed to run through that squad. You could sense a real dearth of confidence after it manifesting itself in performances.
We've been critical in this hour of clubs hiring and firing managers. And we talk about Dundee, Hearts, Kilmarnock, You know, going on to our 7th manager. Well, actually, you would have thought Aberdeen would have been high in that list. They're actually not that high.
Yeah.
Since 2019, Aberdeen have had 4 managers. So, you know, although Dave Cormack had a ropey spell, it looked as if he was going through them, he seems to really like Jimmy Thelin. And I think my information tallies are yours. I think he wants to stand by him. I just think that becomes a more difficult line to hold if you get into September and October and they're still playing the way they are just now. And fans are not really seeing anything. So this is a big game for Jimmy Thelin, because if he won this cup, it would give him such an impetus and such a level of confidence, and that he would be unstoppable in terms of the perception of the fans.
Yeah, okay, we never shirk opinion on this programme. I just feel they're going to get trounced on that park.
I think Celtic will win, yeah. I mean, I don't think, if you look at it anyway and you look at the bookmakers' odds, I think the only reasonable conclusion of looking at everything this season is that Celtic win. But like all things, football everybody's got a puncher's chance in football over 90 minutes. But I think, I would agree that Celtic will win.
Don't think they'll get trounced. I think Celtic will win.
Yeah, I agree. I think all the evidence points to the fact that Celtic will win it, but I would agree with you. Like, you never know in a final. You never know what can happen in a one-off game. But I think if you to sit down and analyse both squads, where they are, performances, players, all evidence points to a Celtic win.
Sometimes, though, the problem which you won't realise, Ali, is sometimes Hugh sits next to Alan Ruff quite a number of times, and what happens is Ruffy just starts giving his probabilities, you know. Ruffy's got this new form of Jamestown analytics when you go, you never know, it's a one-off game, blah, 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 and then Ruffy goes, 5-0.
Listen, Ruffy,
he gives the opposition a cuddle, and then he goes bang.
Unless I'm wrong, Ruffy played in the Partick Thistle team with 4 goals up and Journos Celtic at half-time in the League Cup final.
Right.
So that tells you that you don't always take these things for granted.
Even recently, I mean, who would have given, I mean, I know it's different levels and that, but Crystal Palace v Man City, you know, and everybody, Glasner goes away, tactical genius, everybody, you know, Crystal Palace, blah, 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 blah. But a lot of it in football, and I think Glasner in his own way, it's a bad luck.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, because they were pounded in the second half. They did so well. The goalkeeper saves a penalty. I mean, you know, there's blocks in the penalty area. But football's there to
Fine lines
to confound us, you know.
If Aberdeen win, great. I agree with you, Jimmy Thelin. You know, they'll be thinking about a statue for him there. But you know, I'll wait for your text coming in rapidly on that evening, because I just can't see anything other than
I think it's worth Aberdeen winning just for you to wear the full kit, to be honest with you. I think it's a price well worth paying.
To walk up and down this table.
You're walking up and down the table now, Ali. You've added things
Has
on.
this PLZ subscription level got a sort of OnlyFans? Peter and an OnlyFans?
Exactly.
Is that where we're moving towards? Because I'm all in.
Let's not rule that out, because the way our industry's going, anything goes. A couple of things before we finish then. Livingston, Ross County, if we're talking about managers and their form going into it, again, you've got to look at form. You've got to look and say to yourself, I mean, I've watched them, and I don't think, you know, and I don't at times listen to people, lazy journalism, who haven't watched them and don't know what they're about. Livingston are a good footballing side. You know, they play some good football, they've got some good players. And I look at the situation, I'm saying to myself, they beat them in the Cup earlier in the season. They've had 1 defeat in the last 7 games, 6 wins. County, on the other hand, 9 without a win and 7 defeats. It doesn't augur well for them. And I look at the experience and the mix and the substitutes bench that Livingston have, and I'm thinking to myself, I can see Livingston edge this one. A tight one, but edging it.
I agree. I can see that. I've watched them a few times this season. I agree totally with your summation. They're not the long ball team that everybody thinks they've got. I mean, even in the bench, they've got guys like Andrew Shinnie, who's I think is a real. He can bring Stevie May off the bench as well, as he tends to do. He's really got real good experience in defence. Central defensive partnership of Wilson and McGowan is, you know, that's top notch for that level. Pittman's still a force in midfield. And the thing I get with Livingston, it's tilting me towards Livingston, is I've watched them quite a lot towards the end of the season, and I watched the 2 games against Partick Thistle, and they looked fresh. You know, sometimes the playoff teams going in against and they look, I think Falkirk one year, you just say, oh, this is just going to be a game too far from. I don't get that feeling about Livingston.
Ali?
I would agree. I've watched them. I covered the playoff games and I felt that too. I just wonder sometimes too about momentum, about when you're on a losing streak and you're going into games with such pressure and magnitude around them. And I think it always feels weighted in favour of the top flight side, but I don't know, I fancy Livingston. I think they've got enough about them to come through and prevail.
What's going to have been great escape artists in the last couple of years, but I do worry that they're going to get bullied, physically and mentally bullied by David Martindale's Livingston. I've felt for weeks that Livingston would come through this, and nothing has changed my mind.
Okay, there you are, you've got your opinion on it. You can let us know exactly what you think. Try not to let us know exactly what you think to the same extent that you did on Hugh's comments on ours last week, because there was one which is particularly scathing, and
That was mine, to be fair. That was mine.
I think Ali sent a thing around going, I don't know if it was yours or Cheryl, one of our other journalists, she sent it around going, a friend, and I just, as if it was a friend's review, and I went, probably a cousin, because
Probably my son.
it was brutal. But nevertheless, we've given you the opinion. The season is almost at an end. If I'm being honest with you, in the summation of the football that we've watched, I think Brendan Rodgers and his Celtic side deserve tremendous credit for the way they played in Bayern Munich's stadium. I thought was absolutely the best football I've seen in a long, long while. I thought that deserved particular mention. Some of the standard of football elsewhere has been poor. I enjoyed watching Hibs, to be perfectly honest with you. But I still think we need to this season, hopefully, whether it's through analytics or whatever the hell you want to mention, I think next season we have to have improvements on the other teams out with Celtic and Rangers to get to group stages. If Celtic win the Scottish Cup, Hibs will have group stage European football, which I think is a huge financial shot
But
in the arm.
it kills managers, that. It's amazing, actually. If you look at the managers who have finished third in the Scottish Premiership in recent years, it's almost like a death wish.
Yeah.
The next season they go, quite often I think, because they're going to Europe and they can't cope with the 3 games a week. And it just proves too much for them. It's actually remarkable. And if you're David Gray just now, you'd be slightly concerned, actually. But they need to kick on, Hearts need to kick on, and I do hope the data analytics will help us to just make the league more competitive, and the dual ownership and these new owners coming in just to freshen things up.
Yeah, it needs a wee bit of money spent on clubs and players as well, and hopefully I'd like to see a lot more homegrown players rather than some players who've been taking money and never really contributing to our game. I wish they would invest a little bit more in some of the homegrown talent to give them more. I've picked out 10 players. I've picked 6 in the Championship. This is our last point before we finish. And the reason I've picked them is I've enjoyed watching them. They're not necessarily the best players in the league. I've enjoyed watching them. Add in or take out as you see fit. And it's a good talking point for everyone. And some of these players that I'm mentioning, I think if you were a Scottish Premiership club looking to enhance your squad, you would look at them and say, I should be going and trying to, get them. And the 10, Maeda's been a joy. Centre forward, nobody thought he was going to go on and score the goals that he scored. Nico Raskin I like because I like the way he rats about in the middle of the field. It's the greatest compliment I can play him. He really is.
Back in the, retained in the Belgium squad that was announced.
Loves a header from a corner as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah. Nicky Cadden, best crosser of the ball in the division's fantastic. Me personally, I love Callum McGregor because he makes the game so easy that when he's in there, you're now at the point where you're saying to yourself, I'm not going to mention him, he's a 9 out of 10 anyway. He just takes the ball off players in places which are difficult and makes it easy for them. I'm going to give Craig Gordon a mention because for his age and the fact that he still comes up with big saves for Hearts was incredible. I thought he was magnificent. Toyosi Olasanya got his move, but was a real thorn for a lot of clubs when he played with St Mirren. Lennon Miller, obviously, because I was starting to watch and see if he is the big wig that everybody's talking about, taking it. Has he got the same type of thing as a Lewis Ferguson?
I think he's a different player from Lewis Ferguson, but he certainly, I saw him at Ibrox in the Motherwell game. Obviously, Ibrox, Motherwell victory there, and I thought it was just the little things that he did, just almost metronomic, taking the ball quickly and moving it on. I said, oh yeah, he's very assured for his age.
I've mentioned one out of left field, soft spot for him, Bruce Anderson. Scored, double figures this season for Kelly. Obviously the twilight of his career, but still a good player and absolutely works his socks off. One out of left field was Larkesh, the left back for Dundee, because I like left backs who actually pass the ball forward, Ali. Rather than, I'm not naming any names, I'm just saying to you. And Ronan Hale. Anybody else that
if I was choosing a left back, I like James Penrice at Hearts.
James
I
Penrice
like Penrice at Hearts. I look at Hibs. I think Chantis has had a terrific season. Totally agree, Nicky Cadden. Glad you got him up so high. Goalkeeper Zach Hemming, I think, deserves a real mention in dispatches. I think he's been terrific. Couple of Dundee just to round it off. I really liked Adewumi. I've seen him, obviously on loan from Burnley, and obviously as a sort of cut above. But that kind of player who I think a club could pick up for a reasonable fee, and he's shown he can do it up here. And Josh Mulligan as well, who I've really liked at Dundee as well. So there's players out there.
And I think as well, the boy Wales at Kilmarnock, I think he's a big miss, and he also says we can do a whole programme on this, and how young players are now, it's very difficult to bring them through, but it's almost impossible to retain them now.
Yeah.
Kieran Bowie's a case in point there as well. He's been terrific.
I liked him at the weekend. I've picked out 7 players from down in the Championship that I really liked. Calvin Miller, I think. If somebody could look at him with his left peg, I thought he was excellent. Macaulay Tate is on loan from Hearts, but he comes and takes the ball off the back line, which is what I like. Keelan Adams.
He's a standout for me.
Robbie Muirhead at Livingston. Brian Graham. Still think you can get another 3 moves out of him. You might get one other move that might surprise everybody, by the way. Dylan Easton, midfielders, and Stephen Kelly at Livingston. So I've picked, there might be others that you've watched yourself, but I thought those guys, I liked watching them.
I think Dylan Watts, the fullback at Ayr United's got a future. He's still a bit, not quite immature because he's very, very young, but he's absolutely lightning. I went to a game, and I think most of the scouts there, it was Falkirk, Vieira, and I think a lot of them were there to watch Dylan, and they ended up watching the Falkirk right back Adams instead because he had such a good game that day. I think the boy Spencer in midfield for Falkirk.
That's what I was going to say.
Brad Spencer.
John Spencer's son.
Terrific.
I think he's a real.
I didn't realise that was Brad Spencer's son.
I think he's a real. What's the word for it? Like Lennon Miller, he's a real sort of like presence in midfield and just keeps everybody playing. Falkirk were. My championship games this season, I watched a lot of championship games this season for me, and live, not just on the telly night and a lonely Friday night for an old age pensioner. Watched that, but there was some really good footballers in the championship.
Yeah, well worthy of catching your eye at some point, and you never know, maybe some of the Scottish Premiership clubs will snap them up. It's not the last of the Journos. We'll be back again next week, but next week is a different twist, obviously. If you're listening to it in the podcast, hopefully you'll enjoy the chat. If you're watching it on YouTube, apparently it's going to be a walk across the centre of the studio with an Aberdeen top on, so that's not to be
Full kit.
and then you can subscribe to my new channel, which Hugh's just given me an idea for. But then again,
I hope you're not planning to make that your day job, Peter. That's all I would say.
Listen, there are some in our profession who've taken on roles that I think really. Anyway, apart from anything else, always good to get absolutely battered by Hugh MacDonald, Stephen McGowan and Alison McConnell. Hopefully you enjoyed the programme. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel if you want additional content over the summer. We've got PLZ Premium, but to all of you, thank you for listening and watching.